In 2005, she received the Presidential Medal of Freedom, a deeply emotional moment for the singer who had been honored previously by President Clinton with a National Medal of Arts and by the Kennedy Center. Franklin was a diva, and she made no bones about it. But she was also a trailblazer for women and an African-American artist who achieved success against the backdrop of the civil rights movement. List of firsts goes on forever, like being the first woman to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. She used her voice to crash through barriers. Rolling Stone once ranked Aretha Franklin the #1 greatest singer of all time. She had an almost maternal attitude toward her own songs.
They're like my children. I love them all. But there are some that I liked a little more than others. Respect, certainly, The Freeway, Jump to It, Natural Woman.
Millions of Americans know her music by heart. All we need to hear is the first few notes. We know the rest. All because she showed the way and set the standard. Aretha Louise Franklin was born in Memphis, Tennessee. Her father, Reverend C.L. Franklin, was a well-known Baptist minister. Her mother was a singer and pianist. It wasn't always a happy or stable home, and so music played a big role in Aretha Franklin's life. She was a child prodigy. She was performing in church and playing piano by the age of 10.
They put a small box in front of the pulpit so I could be seen over the pulpit, and that's where I would stand and sing. Hold my hand.
By 14, she recorded her first album. Teenage motherhood derailed her musical career for a spell, but by her early 20s, she'd hit the top 10 with her song, I Never Loved a Man.
Loved a man the way that I love you.
1 year later, she won her first 2 Grammys for Respect. And as they say, a star was born.
You go on stage, something very electric, like a neon sign lights up inside of Lady Soul, Miss Aretha. What do you feel like?
I feel good. Does that happen, really? I light up?
Yes, ma'am.
It didn't take long for her to be dubbed the Queen of Soul, and there was no argument. After hitting a rough spot with dismal record sales in the mid-70s, Franklin found a way to break through again in the cult classic, The Blues Brothers. She was signed to Arista Records soon after and couldn't be stopped after that. Countless hits and honors followed. Memorable collaborations with the greats of our time, including the late Luther Vandross and her huge hit with George Michael. Her life was not without its struggles and demons. In her later years, she preferred a life of privacy and stayed home in Detroit for long stretches of time. Aretha Franklin is survived by her 4 sons and millions of fans around the world.
I love what I do, and I just wouldn't be doing anything else. In fact, I thought, what else would I have done?
Lester Holt, NBC News.
No one like her before, likely nobody like her since. Roland Martin joins me now on the phone. He's the host of News One, now on TV One cable network. I was just looking at the Twitterverse. John Legend, among the first to tweet, Roland, salute to the Queen, the greatest vocalist I've ever known. Anybody out there you think want to disagree with that? I mean, we will miss her, and yet you can't help but smile when you listen to that obituary by Lester Holt, because those songs just make you feel good.
Well, absolutely, Chris, and I think what is so amazing is that when you talk about iconic, and there are people who you meet. There are. I've always said this here, that there are great singers and entertainers there are legends, and then there are icons. There are people who you meet, and when you in their presence, you literally approach them in a different way, and that was Aretha Franklin. The only people who I would put in that category would be James Brown, a Prince, a Michael Jackson. That's rarefied air we're talking about, and that's how it was when you met her. That's how it was when you approached her. You approached her. I mean, stars like John Legend would approach her that way. That's the kind of reverence people had for Aretha Franklin.
Yeah, I just want to read through some of the things that were given to her, the honors. She has a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, first woman inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Grammy Legend Award. She won 18 Grammys, recipient of a Kennedy Center honor, National Medal of Arts, Presidential Medal of Freedom. She was ranked in Billboard's Hot 100 all-time lists of artists. She had her voice, and we know that she spent so much of her time in Detroit, declared a natural resource in the state of Michigan. She has honorary degrees from Harvard University, doctorates from Princeton, Yale, Brown, Berklee College of Music, New England Conservatory of Music, the University of Michigan. Is it possible to even put into, a few sentences, Roland, her impact on the world of music, but also as we see from the Kennedy Center honors, the kisses going out from Carole King, her impact on music, but also her impact on the world?
No, I don't think you can, because she was simply that great. She was that iconic. But here's something that is so important, Chris. She was the daughter of Reverend C.L. Franklin. At her heart, she was a Christian. She was a woman who never left the church. And not only that, she was a proud African-American woman. She was a huge supporter of civil rights in America, around the world. The money that she gave, the free concerts. At the Selma red carpet, there was a journalist who asked her, "Did you know Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.?" And she didn't admonish him. She said, "Well, yes, I did." And what she understand, Dr. King stayed at her home. Because whenever he came to Detroit, at the dinner table conversations. And so when you talk about in terms of the people who she came in contact with by virtue of singing as well, legendary figures of the 20th and 21st century. And so I was just talking to former Attorney General Eric Holder a couple of days ago. They surprised him at his retirement ceremony with her singing his song. The video's on YouTube. You can see him tearing up. And as a matter of fact, we were just texting about 1 minute ago. And the impact that she had just on not just the generation of people when she was with Columbia and Atlantic, but multiple generations. You would have grandmothers, daughters, and granddaughters all in the same place loving Aretha Franklin. I have nieces who are 14 years old who revered her, and they never met her. In fact, I'll tell you this story, Chris. I want to talk about her loyalty. Chris, she performed in D.C. I had to give a speech somewhere, and I couldn't go to her concert. I told her, I said, my wife, my two nieces want to meet you. She said, I would love to meet them. Well, Michelle Obama and Eric Holder were at the concert, and so Secret Service cleared out backstage. And so the next day, she called me, and she says, Roland, what happened to your nieces? And I said, well, Secret Service is what happened. She said, let me call you back. And she called me back. She said, I need to apologize to you. She cussed out her grandson. She said, I told you to take care of people. I wanted to take care of his two nieces. And so you would think, wait a minute, hold up. You're the Queen of Soul, the First Lady and the Attorney General. She says, no. But I made it clear, you take care of his two nieces. So that's how she also was. She cared about people. And when you think about that, you go, wait a minute, but you're this iconic figure. But no, she also was loyal. She was loyal, and people loved her.
Yeah, and it takes an extraordinary human being to be who she was, to have the gift that she gave, and to have the adulation that she received, and to stay humble, and to stay in touch, and as you say, to stay loyal. Her family, Roland, has just put out a statement. It is with deep and profound sadness we announce the passing of Aretha Louise Franklin, the Queen of Soul. She was 76 years old. She passed away Thursday morning, 9:50 a.m. at her home in Detroit, Michigan. surrounded by family and loved ones. Franklin's official cause of death was due to advanced pancreatic cancer of the neuroendocrine type, which is confirmed by Franklin's oncologist. Quote, "It is in one of the darkest moments of our lives, we are not able to find the appropriate words to express the pain in our heart. We have lost the matriarch and rock of our family. The love she had for her children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews, and cousins knew no bounds. We have been deeply touched by the incredible outpouring of love and support we have received from close friends, supporters, and fans all around the world. Thank you for your compassion and prayers. We have felt your love for Aretha, and it brings us comfort to know that her legacy will live on. As we grieve, we ask that you respect our privacy during this difficult time. We expect that funeral arrangements will be announced in the coming days." Ron Mott is in Detroit outside the church where her father was a pastor. Ron?
Hey there, Chris. Good morning. This is obviously sad news, not unanticipated. Obviously, it's been in the news here in Detroit for the past few days as her condition apparently it worsened. We do understand that Jesse Jackson visited yesterday, Stevie Wonder earlier in the week, among other friends and family who have been by her bedside here for the past few days. We believe she's been under hospice care for a little over a week. And I just reached out just before this all broke to her publicist just before we had it here and got the official word. And so this is obviously very sad news. We've been here since yesterday talking to some of the folks who are members of New Bethel Baptist Church. Her dad, C.L. Franklin, a legend, the late C.L. Franklin legend here in Detroit and around the world in evangelical circles, pastored this church for 30-plus years, and he was her first manager. I believe he was the one who had the good sense to put that young child in front of a microphone and a piano, and the rest is history. This is essentially where the Queen of Soul, the legend of Aretha Franklin, was born. She worshiped here with her father and sisters and brother for many years, and then as she became a star, as she continued to stay in the church. Yesterday we interviewed the current pastor, Dr. Smith, who told us that while she may have gone on to greater heights and international stardom, she never left the church. And Chris, you had earlier talked about the incredible musical catalog that she's going to leave behind for generations to come. The pastor here very proud of the fact that she always remained in touch with the gospel and in touch with her New Bethel home here. She used to come back occasionally to hold concerts here. She never really left. In fact, there's a cornerstone on the building here with her name as one of the patrons here. And as we said, her father was very well known here in Detroit and around the world. We can tell you that she started her career in the gospel. She produced a couple of albums, and then Sam Cooke was someone that she was really into, and she told her dad she wanted to kind of follow in his footsteps and try to get a pop career off the ground. And boy, did it really get off the ground. All the accolades that came over the years. You can't even pick a favorite Aretha song. Respect is one perhaps she's most well known for. It's actually an Otis Redding song, but she took it to a new level 3 years after he recorded it, and it became an anthem, if you will, for feminists and women, especially African-American women. And that's a song that a lot of people are going to be hearing and probably downloading today and as we go on the next few days. And so respect, so many songs. And if I could just share one personal note, I'm a huge fan of Aretha Franklin. Wasn't necessarily part of her generation or the generation of folks who were born in the 40s and 50s to take to her music. But one of the most impressive things I think I saw from this incredible talent was that I believe at the 98 Grammys, when Luciano Pavarotti could not perform, so she took the bold move to say she would perform Nessa Dorma. And just, it may not have been technically expert, but it was so unique and so mesmerizing that I downloaded that song and I play it over and over, and I will be playing that again in the next few days and hours. Chris?
Yeah, you know, I was, as you were talking, we're playing, Ron, and you can't see it, but we're playing these various videos of her, and there's one in which she's actually performing as, I believe this was when Carole King got her own Kennedy Center honor, and you can just see the look on her face of astonishment. We showed Barack and Michelle Obama, and they're just out of their minds. You know, we do, as Roland Martin Martin said, often talk about iconic figures. There aren't that many people when you reach the level of a Carole King or you reach the level of a Barack Obama that, you know, give you kind of jelly in the knees, that kind of blow you away, who you just have to stand back and sort of do the little bow to. She definitely was one of those people at the highest levels of society. But tell us a little more, Ron, about what she meant to what has been a struggling community of Detroit, that was always her home, that's where she came back to, and that's where she chose to spend her final weeks.
Well, as we know, Detroit has been going through quite a tough time over the past few decades, but this city has embraced her as one of their own. She decided to make this her home. At one point, she did move out to the West Coast. She was born in Memphis, moved to Detroit here when she was 4 years old, but this is her home. This is what she related to this city, the blue-collar nature of this city, the love that the people have for one another here. She is a queen here. She is definitely royalty here. In more recent years, she had sort of withdrawn from the public eye, but what's really impressive about her body of work is that in the music industry, which is a very competitive industry, and the shelf life is pretty short for a lot of pop stars who come along, they hit it, and then 2 or 3 years later, they're gone. Her career amassed almost 60 years, Chris. I mean, she did suffer some slumping sales in the 70s, but then came back. I remember her in the Blues Brother with that turn as a waitress. She was terrific in that. And then her career sort of took off again. In the early 90s, she had that hit song, that #1 hit song with George Michael, I Knew You Were Waiting. And her career continued to climb as she aged, which is so difficult in this industry where youth is embraced more than perhaps some of the older artists, and she remained relevant. This city is going to be mourning, obviously. We're at the church here. They've just opened the doors. There hasn't been much of a memorial here, but people have been dropping balloons by. We do anticipate that as word spreads around the city, that New Bethel is probably going to be a place where a lot of people will start to head. Chris?
Carole King just tweeted, "What a life, what a legacy, so much love, respect, and gratitude, R.I.P. Aretha Franklin." I want to go back, if I can, to Roland Martin. And I understand, Roland, you have been in touch with folks who can give us a little sense of her illness and maybe what these final weeks have been for her.
Well, first and foremost, she was an extremely private woman, and so she did not talk about her illness. She did not share it with people. Many folks knew what was going on in terms of, because she was canceling concerts and things along those lines. And so anytime she would cancel one of those concerts, I would call her and I would tweet her and I would text her, say, "Hey, Queen, how are you doing?" See, Chris,
Did you just say I used to text her? I mean, you're like blowing me away here. The idea that I would have Aretha Franklin in my phone is almost makes my head explode.
Well, it was crazy because here's what happened. In 2007, she sends an email to my office praising me for my work on CNN. And my agent Mark Watts said, "Oh, this is a fake." And then they called and he said, "Dude, this is real." And I finally got to meet her in February 2008. And so for the last 11 years, we would talk, we would text. And so back in December, on Christmas Day, my parents were in my home in Virginia. We were making this gumbo. And I sent the Queen the video. She says, "Oh, my God, I got to taste some of that gumbo." And so we talked. And we talked on Christmas Day. And she said, "I got to get some of that." And over the last January and February, we would hit back and forth. And I could actually read this from you on March 17th. March 17th at 2:15, Dennis Edwards had died, and I texted her, and she said, "Take good care. Yes, one of the great voices of our time." And then I said, "You doing okay? Getting your strength back?" She said, "Yes, coming along." And then I texted her back, and we were talking about, I'm going to be in Detroit. And she said, "Hey, bring some of that gumbo for 4. I'll make the cornbread." Then she went, "Gumbo for 6, okay?" And I said, "Working on it."
And she cooks too? Is that what you're telling me? I mean, come on, that's not fair.
Right. Well, and so a week later, I was in Detroit for a board meeting of the National Association of Black Journalists, and I was going to go make her gumbo. But then one of her folks told me that she had dehydration, and she went to the hospital that weekend. I didn't get a chance to see her. And that was the last weekend we communicated. And I would send her texts in April and May, and when she didn't respond, I knew what was happening with her health. And when I was in Detroit 2 weeks ago for NABJ National Convention, and I talked to one of her close guys, and he told me that she was going to the hospital that following Monday. And so I knew that her transition was near. And I can just tell you that, to be able to talk to her, Chris, she called me one night at 12:30. I'm asleep. I got to be up in 4 hours. And I see this 248 number. And she goes, Roland? She goes, this is Aretha. And I always called her Queen. And she said, boy, I saw that Wendy Williams commentary you did. You had me rolling. And for 20 minutes, she was on. Now, mind you, I'm tired. But you can't tell the Queen I'm going to call you back.
Well, not only that, but if the Queen calls you and she's like totally fangirling on you, I would think that would be something that would wake you up. But that also speaks to how, kind and thoughtful. I mean, how many people do that? How many they may think of it? She took the time to call you, even though she woke you up.
Oh, no, not only that. Okay, so remember, the first time I met her, she's at a concert in Los Angeles, and I'm there. She's got an Image Award that year, and so some friends had some tickets, so we went. We're sitting like 20, 25 rows back, and I say, well, hey, you know what? She sent me this email last year. Hey, let's go backstage. And so we go backstage, and we're one of the last ones to greet her, and then she goes, why didn't you let anyone know that you were here? I would have shouted you out from the stage. And I'm going, well, who am I supposed to tell? And so she goes, one of our guys says, okay, she said, give him all of my phone numbers. If you ever at my concert, you got to let me know beforehand. And we took pictures backstage, and from that moment on, from that moment until her passing, we would just talk and we would just text, and it was just, it was just amazing. And she was a regular person. She was a regular person who she loved news. She watched news all the time, and she would call me and talk about politics and what's going on and isn't this stuff crazy and what's happening. And then she would encourage those of us in news. Sean Robinson, entertainment journalist, known her since '87. Tamron Hall, same thing. And so, she was a news junkie. And so it was great to know her. It was great to see her anytime we would talk. And yeah, I cherish those conversations where we would just talk about whatever or text about whatever. And that's just how she was.
And I should say, Roland, and I should say to everybody who knew her and loved her that, we are so sorry for your loss. And it's a loss that we all share, even those of us who don't have her personal number in her phone. But, this has been a really joyous conversation in many ways because as we listen to that music in the background, it is so joyous. And I just want to read from Eric Holder, of course, the former Attorney General. I'm so saddened by the passing of an American icon who defined this nation's music. We loved Aretha. She also made us proud through her unparalleled gift and hard work. She spoke for people too often without their own voice. She and her artistry were gifts to us from God. And we just want to play for you when she sang at the inauguration of Eric Holder's boss, Barack Obama.
Oh
It's extraordinary to think of her being in her 60s at a time when a lot of vocalists have lost their gifts, and it's mesmerizing, absolutely mesmerizing. Another singer who has a few formidable gifts, Barbra Streisand, tweeted a picture of herself with Aretha Franklin and said the photo was taken in 2012 when Aretha and I performed at a tribute celebration for our friend Marvin Hamlish. It's difficult to conceive of a world without her. Not only was she a uniquely brilliant singer, but her commitment to civil rights made an indelible impact on the world. The Reverend Al Sharpton joins us now. Let's talk about that, her impact on the world, her impact on civil rights.
I think one of the things, I was talking to Erlene, Aretha's sister, yesterday, and one of the things that she really wanted people to know about her was her commitment to civil rights. Her father, Reverend C.L. Franklin, was a partner to Dr. Martin Luther King, and the march in Detroit that led to the march in Washington in '63 was where Dr. King first talked about I Have a Dream. That was co-chaired by her father. So she literally grew up in the movement. She used to tell me all the time that in the last year of Dr. King's life, she did concerts with Harry Belafonte to raise money so Dr. King could meet payroll. And all the way till now, she has our work, a National Action Network with Trayvon. She would call me, Rev Mal, what's that address at home? And she'd send a check to help National Action Network work even now. She was the type of person that was an activist in her heart, as long as it was for civil rights and human rights for everybody. She never stopped with that. She would call my radio show. I'm on 3 hours a day in Detroit. So if she's home, she'd listen to talk radio. And she'd just call under another name and give an opinion. And then I'd say, that's Aretha Franklin. Yeah, it's me. And she talked. I mean, she was the ultimate activist. But she wasn't the kind that would go out and showboat. She didn't go to the rallies and the marches. She was the one that would contribute in her name. I never forget when I turned 60 3 years ago. And everybody, we had this big party, birthday party. The governor's there and the mayor's there and Phil Griffin, everybody from here is there. And Aretha Franklin walked in. And people couldn't believe it. That's Aretha. And I brought her up, and she did her birthday thing for me, and I go to her birthday every year.
Wait a minute. She sang at your birthday party.
She sang on my radio show, my birthday party. I'm playing that later today. And she got up and she cut the cake for me. But the thing that most stood out is that when we were walking out, because this was in the middle of, we were fighting the Eric Garner case, she says, I didn't have to go to Staten Island. I made a statement coming to your birthday tonight. So she was very politically aware of what she was doing, what she wanted to weigh into, what she wanted to support, and what she didn't. And I'm talking about decades. I'm talking about from the 60s when she was very young, all the way up to those of us that are active in that civil rights space now.
You know, we talk, obviously, whenever anyone of stature dies, we talk about their legacy, but lessons, as you think about the way that she handled her commitment to civil rights, as she showed her passion for her hometown of Detroit, as she stayed close to the people that mattered to her, as she reached out, as we heard, to young women who were journalists or young women of black women of achievement, to offer encouragement. What's the lesson to be learned when people reach a certain level of fame, of wealth, of influence, about how she handled herself and how she could show others how to handle that?
I think the legacy is that she probably is the greatest female vocalist of all time, but she had a purpose she wanted to serve. And she would always say that don't just want to shine, use your shine to shine a light on something that is in a dark place. And I think that's what made Aretha Franklin more than just a megastar. She became something that embodied the best in her artistry and used her artistry for a greater purpose than just a number-one record. And I think that's why Barack Obama wanted her to sing at the inauguration of the first black president. That's why you see people all over the world mourning her because she wasn't just another hit artist. She used that platform to help humanity, even in ways that people couldn't see. She was a great person. And if you're a flawed person to get a spotlight, we're going to see the flaws. If you're a great person that gets the spotlight, we see the greatness. And the brighter the light, the greater she looked.
We are getting tweets now from Clive Davis, who produced many of her albums after she went to Arista Records. I am absolutely devastated by Aretha's passing. She was truly one of a kind. She was more than the Queen of Soul. She was a national treasure to be cherished by every generation throughout the world. And he goes on to say, goodbye, Miss Aretha. You were my... he goes on to say, apart from our long professional relationship, Aretha was my friend. Her loss is deeply profound, and my heart is full of sadness. From Idina Menzel, who Broadway star, but became probably internationally famous with Frozen. Goodbye, Miss Aretha. You were my idol, the greatest singer of all time. Every note you sang was pure and authentic and pierced our hearts with joy and pain and life. I think we have Alicia Quarles on the phone. She is an actress and entertainment journalist. She has interviewed Aretha Franklin. What are your thoughts now on the passing of the Queen of Soul?
Love you, Chris. Not an actress, always a journalist, though. Well, my thoughts on her passing are just thinking about the last time I interviewed her, which was at one of her birthday parties that Reverend Sharpton just talked about. And we talked about her life and her legacy. And she said what kept her going was the fact that she felt like she could relate to everyone of every generation. And then that she was so happy. Her son was there. Her nephew had come in. Dennis Edwards, the lead singer for The Temptations, sung to her. She joined him for a duet. And even back then, we had heard rumblings that she was sick with cancer. She looked thinner, but she didn't talk about it. And there's an excellent article in The New Yorker where the author goes on to say that denial is her strategy for emotional survival. So she would have never admitted if she was sick or on her deathbed. But, you know, she was a survivor. This is someone who crossed over from gospel music in 1963 when people said, you can't do it. She said, Sam Cooke did it, I can do it. And she was always a trailblazer, so I think that'll be her legacy.
Tell me a little bit about what you think her role was as a role model, especially for young women of color.
Oh, I think several. I mean, it goes back several ways. So her mother left at a very young age. Her father, of course, a famous preacher. So she was left with her 3 other siblings. She basically had to raise herself. She was in a very abusive marriage, had 2 children. She left that situation. So this was a woman that was defining norms when, you know, you were supposed to be at home cooking and being the good little woman behind your husband. She said she wasn't doing that. And in fact, even until the very end, she demanded to be paid in cash, and she would put that cash in a purse that either one of her handlers held or she could see from the stage, because back in the day she had been ripped off and she didn't want that to happen before. So I think it's
she put the cash in a purse.
Absolutely she did, so she could see where her money was. And so I think it's bad. I think it's of a civil rights leader, because you got to remember, you had people like Dr. King coming to her house growing up. So she was very entrenched in the civil rights movement. And, you know, Carole King wrote Natural Woman for Aretha Franklin, and she talks about watching Aretha sing it at the Kennedy Center Honors and looking over and seeing Barack Obama crying, weeping by this beautiful song. And if you read the New Yorker article, Barack Obama talks about what Aretha meant to everyone, and as far as just being a strong woman and her legacy for black people. And she says that gospel came out of slavery. It came out of being oppressed. And her autobiographer says there was always something very sad about Aretha that you just couldn't quite put your finger on.
You know, we're hearing in the background her singing You Make Me Feel Like a Natural Woman. In my opinion, one of the greatest songs of all time, and nobody sang it better than Aretha Franklin. Let's listen.
When my soul was in the lost and found, a mighty good man came along to claim it. I didn't know just what was wrong with me until your kiss helped me name it. Now I'm no longer down natural woman. You make me feel like a natural.
Unfortunate she didn't have a range. I mean, that's just crazy. Diana Ross tweeted, "I'm sitting in prayer for the wonderful golden spirit, Aretha Franklin, Lionel Richie. Her voice, her presence, her style. No one did it better. Truly the Queen of Soul. I will miss you." Hillary Clinton has tweeted as well, and by the way, she sang at Bill Clinton's inauguration as well as Jimmy Carter's. Mourning the loss today of Aretha Franklin, who shared her spirit and talent with the world. She deserves not only our RESPECT, respect, but also our lasting gratitude for opening our eyes, ears, and hearts. Rest in eternal peace, my friend. With us now, MSNBC media analyst and NPR TV critic Eric Deggans to talk about her abilities. I mean, her ability, first of all, just the gift she had, but the way she mixed, you know, pop and gospel and R&B, all of it really. Talk about the gift that is Aretha Franklin.
Yeah, she was arguably one of the most successful artists to cement this image of the R&B, soul, pop diva. She came from gospel music. Obviously, her father was a minister of the church, and she grew up singing gospel music, and her early albums were gospel music. But she gained her greatest fame as a singer who took all the power and soul of gospel music and R&B and soul and put it together to create these classic songs that kind of not only became the most successful R&B and soul songs of their time, but the most successful pop songs and the most successful songs of our soul tradition. And she established a standard as a singer. I mean, if you listen to Whitney Houston, if you listen to Anita Baker, if you listen to Mariah Carey, Mary J. Blige, Beyonce, all of them are walking on ground that was initially pioneered by Aretha Franklin, and they all owe a debt to her, and I'm sure they'd be the first to acknowledge that.
Elton John tweeting, "The loss of Aretha Franklin is a blow for everybody who loves real music, music from the heart, the soul, and the church. Her voice was unique, her piano playing underrated. She was one of my favorite pianists." Quincy Jones, among other things, he writes in a statement, "Aretha Franklin set the bar upon which every female singer has and will be measured, and she did it with the professionalism, class, grace, and humility that only a true queen could. You will reign as the queen forever." I think we've got a photo, Reverend Al, of you and Aretha Franklin and Eric Holder as well, who, as we said, also tweeted.
That was at her birthday party here in New York. She'd have a party every year. And I would go the last several years.
What was that party like?
Oh, it was Aretha. It was regal, but it was also down to earth. And she would have entertainers come and leading political figures. In this particular party, Eric Holder and his wife came, and we were there, and we took that picture. And it was Aretha did everything with class. And you would know you were among royalty, but at the same time down home. She never lost that authenticity and that whole church feeling. I teased all the time when I was looking at you just played her singing the inauguration. I told her you were wearing the ultimate Sunday go-to-meeting church hat.
Isn't that true? That was an amazing hat. That was so fantastic.
Yeah, she loved it, too. She absolutely was the ultimate. She never left her gospel roots. And any concert, she'd break out in a gospel song and do a holy dance. She didn't care who was there. She never was in